Majestic rock formations rise towards the heavens.
A place where the spiritual meets the terrestrial, where the divine intertwines with the earthly.
The Meteora monasteries stand as remarkable architectural marvels atop towering rock pillars.
High above the Thessalian plains, where stone meets sky, something sacred clings to the clouds. Cliffs rise like fingers from the earth, and at their summits, monasteries float like whispers. This is Meteora, not just carved from rock, but from faith, a miracle in midair. Long before prayers echoed through these cliffs, Meteora was already a marvel of nature. Over 60 million years ago, a vast river system carved and shaped this land, leaving behind the dramatic sandstone towers that now define the region. These columns, some nearly 400 meters high, were formed by erosion, tectonic uplift, and glacial runoff, sculpting a landscape that feels more celestial than terrestrial. The very name Meteora, from the Greek meteoros, means suspended in the air, a name both literal and symbolic. Standing at the base of these natural monuments, one feels the weight of time and the lift of spirit. Grooved cliffs, wind-worn faces, impossible trees growing from stone. This was more than just rock. It was a geological wonder. But these were not merely stones. They would become vessels for silence, for survival, for sanctity. To the casual eye, they were uninhabitable. To those who sought solitude, they were salvation. A canvas had been carved. Now it waited for faith to paint upon it. By the 9th century, as empires raged across Europe and Asia, small groups of Orthodox Christian hermits quietly made their way to the cliffs of Meteora. They lived in natural caves and shallow hollows, using the land as it was. There were no structures, only ledges and silence. These early monks, often alone for days or weeks, gathered only on Sundays for prayer in makeshift stone chapels. Faith flourished in silence. The cliffs became a refuge, not only from war and persecution, but from ego and excess. As the centuries passed, their numbers grew. By the 14th century, the rise of the Ottoman Empire and regional instability pushed more monks to seek shelter in the vertical sanctuary of Meteora. But living on the rocks was no longer enough. Now, they would build upon them. Using tools like rope baskets and human pulleys, the monks began constructing full monasteries atop the cliffs. It took decades, sometimes lifetimes, to complete just one. By the 16th century, over 20 monasteries dotted the peaks of Meteora, each one a monument to persistence, belief, and the defiance of gravity. What began as solitude became a civilization, and the cliffs, once raw and wild, were crowned with domes, icons, and eternal purpose. Perched atop the highest cliff in Meteora, the great Meteoron Monastery is where faith first took root in stone. Founded in the mid-14th century by St. Athanasius, the Meteorite. This monastery wasn't merely built, it was envisioned. He sought not just shelter, but elevation, a closeness to God, unreachable by sword or storm. Athanasius chose the largest rock formation, known as Platus Lithos, the broad rock, and began carving what would become the mother monastery of Meteora. The construction was a feat of devotion and physics. Everything, timber, food, bricks, even people, had to be lifted the cliff, using nets tied to ropes, winched by hand. No stairs existed for centuries. The monks relied on faith and fearlessness. Inside, the Great Meteoron is a museum of monastic life. The kitchen still holds ancient soup stoves and a brick bread oven. An ossuary lines the shelves with the skulls of past monks, stacked in solemn reverence. The monastery preserves not only theology, but Greek identity itself. During the Ottoman rule, it safeguarded books, scrolls, and relics, and acted as a silent university for generations of suppressed Greeks. Even today, it whispers first. The wind that wraps around its stone base carries centuries of hymns and hardship, and above all, resilience. Across the chasm from the Great Meteoron, On another sheer column of stone sits the Monastery of Varlaam, a sanctuary of sacred perseverance. Its story begins with a solitary ascetic named Varlaam, who scaled the pillar in the 14th century and built a small chapel with his own hands. But after his death, the site lay abandoned until nearly 2 centuries later, when 2 brothers arrived, determined to build upon the foundation of faith he left behind. In the early 16th century, they began lifting timber, stone, and lime mortar up the vertical face of the rock, using only rope baskets and winch wheels. 22 years of preparation passed before the construction even began. Their labor was not merely architectural, it was devotional. The result? One of the most beautifully preserved monasteries in Meteora. The original hoisting basket still hangs there, a relic of daring faith and endless patience. Stone terraces now offer views of the Thessalian plain, stretching endlessly beyond the cloistered walls. Varlaam stands not just as a house of God, but as a monument to brotherhood. 2 siblings who lifted stone and spirit into the sky, brick by brick, prayer by prayer. And like their monastery, their legacy endures, balanced perfectly between heaven and earth. Nestled on a lower, narrow cliff, surrounded by cypress trees and winding stone paths, the Monastery of Rousanou stands as a softer, more tender face of Meteora. It doesn't loom, it invites. Unlike its lofty neighbors, Rousanou is more accessible, making it a favorite for pilgrims, the elderly, and those who come seeking not grandeur, but grace. Dedicated to St. Barbara, this monastery likely dates to around 1545, though its origins are shrouded in gentler mystery. Built with elegance rather than dominance, its compact structure hugs the rock it rests upon. Inside, narrow corridors lead to intimate chapels where Byzantine frescoes bloom in delicate blues and golds. During World War II, Rousanou suffered severe damage. In 1988, restoration brought it back to life. Today, it is a functioning convent, home to Orthodox nuns, who tend to the chapel, garden, and guest rooms with quiet devotion. Rousanou doesn't demand silence. It offers it freely, not a place to escape the world, but a place to listen to it more quietly. Here, faith feels less like a fortress and more like a shelter, a place not of walls but of welcome. Tucked into a slender rock pillar, and often overlooked by those seeking grandeur, the Monastery of St. Nicholas Anapausas offers something different: quiet intimacy. It is the smallest of the 6 active monasteries, and perhaps the most contemplative. Built in the early 16th century, it clings to a narrow ledge of stone, where space was scarce, and so monks built upward, not outward. Each level of the monastery is stacked carefully above the next, linked by steep staircases and arched corridors. Here, there are no vast halls or sweeping courtyards, only a compact, vertical world where every stone has a purpose. The monastery is named for St. Nicholas, the patron of sailors and travelers, and Anapausas, meaning rest, as if this humble place was designed as a resting point for the soul on its journey heavenward. Because of its limited space, St. Nicholas could never house large numbers of monks, but it was never meant to. It was, and still is, a place of personal prayer, a monastery for those seeking depth, not height. The climb to reach it may be steep, but the reward is profound, not in what you see from above, but in what you feel within, rising from its solitary peak. The Monastery of the Holy Trinity appears more like a vision than a structure, a stone ship anchored in the sky. It is the most isolated of all the Meteora monasteries, and perhaps the most poetic. Founded in the late 15th century, its builders chose not convenience, but seclusion. To reach it, one must climb over 140 steep steps, carved directly into the rock, twisting upward through stone and wind. There are no surrounding plateaus, only void. The cliff falls away on all sides, leaving the monastery entirely suspended, as if untouched by time or gravity. From the outside, its compact complex blends seamlessly into the rock. Low stone buildings, tiled rooftops, and a small central courtyard barely large enough for a handful of monks. But within this simplicity lies profound depth. In 1981, the monastery gained international fame when it was featured in the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only. Viewers around the world watched as secret agents scaled its cliffs, unaware they were stepping into a centuries-old sanctuary of prayer. Despite this fame, Holy Trinity remains the least visited, partly due to its difficult approach. But those who do reach it find a reward beyond scenery, a rare kind of peace, carved into stone, cradled by sky. Unlike its skyward siblings, clinging to isolated rock towers, the Monastery of St. Stephen stands on a broad plateau, connected to the outside world by a modest bridge. Here, there are no rope ladders, no vertical climbs, only a gentle walk across a bridge. But don't mistake its ease of access for a lack of spiritual weight. Dating back to the 15th century, the monastery was once a refuge for monks fleeing conflict and empire. It overlooks the Pineos River Valley and the sweeping plains of Thessaly, offering perhaps the most panoramic view of any Meteora monastery. Heavily damaged during World War II and then abandoned for a time, it was reborn in the 1960s as a convent, now home to a devoted community of Orthodox nuns. They restored its chapels, gardens, and sacred halls with a gentle touch, bringing life back into cold stone. Today, St. Stephen welcomes thousands of visitors each year. Its accessibility makes it the first encounter many have with Meteora's spiritual world, and its open arms make it ideal for those seeking reflection without the rigors of climbing. The €3 entry, the flower-filled courtyards, the soft chanting of nuns, all feel like a sanctuary extended outward. Meteora is not just stone, not just a monastery. It is a monument to the soul's reach for the divine, where cliffs become cathedrals, and time is carved in fresco, and faith. Tourists walk paths once worn by barefoot hermits. Pilgrims kneel before icons, once painted in candlelight. The UNESCO designation in 1988 helped protect the area, and now preservationists and local villagers all play a part in its guardianship. Even the film world couldn't resist Meteora's surreal majesty. In 1981, the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only captured the dizzying ascent to Holy Trinity Monastery, bringing global audiences face-to-face with its sheer grandeur. Sky Riders in 1976, and the 2012 Greek drama Meteora, each using the cliffs, not just as a backdrop, but as silent characters in their own right. Yet the balance is delicate. Each monastery, a whisper of what once was. Each step taken, part of a journey upward, not just in height, but in understanding. These aren't ruins. They are living testaments to solitude, strength, and the quiet certainty of belief. In a world crowded with noise, Meteora does not compete. It simply stands, timeless, watchful, and whispering.